All right, folks, so here we have it. In my past few videos, I've been referring to the sign of Pisces and how there is a buildup in the sign of Pisces. And indeed, February and March are months, and even April, to be fair, are months where the sign of Pisces is going to show a certain amount of crisis and wear and tear. So let's talk about it since we have the time now before I move on to my full moon in Leo video, which I'll do in the next couple of days before the full moon in Leo on February the 8th. As I mentioned to you before, there's planetary activity currently in a number of signs, but in the way that we can feel it on a day-to-day basis in the signs of Sagittarius, and there's a Mars in Sagittarius video you're welcome to check out. In the sign of Capricorn, there's a solar eclipse in Capricorn video that you're welcome to check out. In the sign of Aquarius, there's a new moon in Aquarius video that you're welcome to check out. Aquarius is especially relevant right now, as is Sagittarius. But Aquarius is especially relevant right now because right now we're in the lunar cycle. The last new moon occurred in the sign of Aquarius on February the 24th. And so we are very much January the 24th. And so we are very much in that 28-day cycle of Aquarius, the lunar cycle of Aquarius, and the sign of Pisces. The sign of Pisces is coming up in everyone's consciousness because Mercury goes retrograde there on February the 17th, and Mercury retrograde is a much anticipated and feared event in the astrological calendar. It is one of the events or transits that we can point to skeptics over time, and I think more people have turned to or allowed astrology to have a certain amount of weight or prominence in their lives as a result of Mercury retrograde periods over time, or behaviors around before and after a new moon or full moon than perhaps any other event, so to speak. The typical things related to a Mercury retrograde will apply around the time when Mercury is going retrograde on the 17th of February and going direct on March the 10th. Technology snafus, delays, travel delays, irritation, strange phone calls and communications with people, particularly customer service, transportation, buses, taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, vehicles, just, Mercury, the planet of transactions and communication and commuting, is in a certain sense, can, on the days or when it's going retrograde or direct, is stationary in the sky and loses potency, loses its ability to move things forward. In addition, today we live in a very Mercury-ruled time. So if your email is always on your phone, as are your social media apps, and you're getting notifications constantly, and you're quick to respond, and everything is happening electronically and technology-wise, then Mercury really is running our lives on a day-to-day basis. You can manage that by turning notifications off, or you can manage that by only checking your email 2 or 3 times a day. But really, how many people do that who feel plugged in or feel the need to be plugged in? And technology, of course, comes under Mercury's influence. So if you want to back up things or take care of things, this would be the time to do it over the next few days. As you get closer to the 17th, and certainly the time period when Mercury is retrograde, computer issues and snafus can also happen, meltdowns, etc., etc. Okay. Let's talk about the sign of Pisces. If you know where Pisces is in your chart, which house it occupies in your chart, and what that house stands for, so much the better. The sign of Pisces has shown a fair amount of activity really since about 2015, 2016. And last quarter of 2015 and first 3 quarters of 2016 were most pronounced. And this was because the eclipses of release, the South Node eclipses, were occurring in the sign of Pisces during that time. And wherever the South Node eclipses are, I refer to that transit or those eclipses really as feeling like a forest fire is blazing in a certain part of your chart. And at that time, it was the sign of Pisces. There was a meltdown, there was a burning down, something needed to be released. It was uncontrollable, it had heat, it was burning away resistance, it was not controllable. Since the eclipses have occurred, one of the things that has been a constant is that every year since then practically, but certainly last year, it can be said comfortably, 2019, and this year, 2020, Mercury has gone retrograde in Pisces at around this time. Last year it was March, April, this year it's February, March. Now the Mercury retrogrades are slowly moving into the sign of Aquarius and the sign of Libra and the sign of the sign of Gemini, as next year and the following years come into play, but that's not the case now. So the two time frames where there's a correlation to Mercury retrograde in Pisces and the Pisces transits that we're dealing with are end of 2015 and much of 2016, and then the retrograde last year in March and April, and then of course we have a retrograde now. The other retrogrades, Mercury retrogrades that have been occurring, could very well have been in some sort of conversation with this particular retrograde too, because they're all happening in water signs. Part of the reason why these Mercury retrogrades in 2019 and in 2020 are being felt so keenly is that having Mercury retrograde in water signs, in the part of the chart that really has so much to do with our emotions and our emotional life and our emotional reactions and our emotional maturity or emotional immaturity, it's a very gnarly place to have the planet of thinking, which is already uncomfortable in these signs, go retrograde here. Events occurring that stand to hurt us deeply. Our mind is struggling to keep up with events that are happening, so much so that there's a struggle between what our intuition is telling us, very much in keeping with these emotional signs of Cancer and Pisces and Scorpio, very intuitive signs, not necessarily very rational signs. And so the planet of rationality is just utterly befuddled in trying to make sense of everything that is going on and has been going on 2015, 2016, and then of course around this time, March and April of last year. This year, and I think with every Mercury retrograde that occurs in the sign of the transits that occur, they bring developments. And I don't know, my hope is that there's a chance of some sort of a greater resolution or moving forward or some clarity or something that likely helps to heal this part of the chart. That's my hope. I don't know. I think that this is still a saga that is unfolding, and Mercury will go retrograde in Cancer in the middle of the year, where we will have a solar eclipse and a new moon, and then Mercury will go retrograde again in Scorpio around the October-November timeframe. So things are still playing out, but progress is necessary and healing is necessary. So we're going to see how it is that this Mercury retrograde affects us. Now, this particular Mercury retrograde cycle has its own structure and has its own saga. Venus entered Pisces on January the 13th and is leaving it tomorrow, February the 7th. Venus loves to be in Pisces. Venus is a planet of letting things happen. Venus is a planet of abundance. Venus is a planet that very much is attuned to and believes in natural laws. Planet of relationships, planet of harmony, planet of letting things find their place, planet of balancing things out, planet of evening out emotional reactions, planet of receptivity, a feminine planet, planet of money. It has to be set in luxuries, but in the sign of Pisces, somewhat less preoccupied with that and much more preoccupied in the sign of Pisces in being an exceptionally giving planet in some ways. So Venus's entry in the sign of Pisces on January the 13th to February the 7th may have meant that we had a sweet introduction into the sign of Pisces in some ways. You can tell by my expression that there's a wrinkle here. There could be the opportunity to build a relationship somehow. There could be the opportunity. And Venus entered Pisces right after that darn full moon lunar eclipse in Cancer on January the 10th. So as part of picking up the pieces after that eclipse, it has been helpful to have Venus in a part of the chart where she could come in and just be like, calm down, everybody calm down, everybody gently, gently, gently. Kind of being a balm in a part of a chart that has been bruised really quite severely or impacted quite severely since 2016, 2015. So we've had the table laid out for it, and we've had the potential for handshakes, and we've had people holding back their fire. That's the way I would put it. The one wrinkle is that the one planet that continues to remain in Pisces and continues to exert its pretty dominating influence is the planet Neptune. Neptune rules Pisces. So it's very, very strong. And Neptune's presence in Pisces has certainly given these eclipses and these Mercury retrogrades a very strong flavor. Neptune is a very interesting and challenging planet. When it comes to the planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, or Uranus, or however you want to pronounce Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the further away you go from the Earth, the less control you have over how these planets are going to impact you. With Uranus, it's aha moments and epiphanies and liberation and greater clarity, insight. With Neptune, well, let me cover Pluto first. With Pluto, it is a kind of transformation, sort of the planet of death and transformation. It's a kind of transformation that you just can't, that you just have to bow down to, that you just have to go along with, you have to accept. It's a little bit like that saying where the barn has to burn down so you can see the moon. Well, if the barn is burning, under Pluto's influence, there's nothing you can do about it. You've got to let it fall to the ground. With Neptune, in a lot of traditional astrology, and even today, Jupiter and Saturn are seen as opposites. Saturn is the planet that asks us to play the game and to accept the rules of physical reality, to be concrete and practical. So if power is measured in concrete terms, abundance and wealth is measured in concrete terms, achievement is measured in concrete terms, in conventional terms when it comes to the sign of Capricorn, and all of this is questioned or upended when you come to the sign of Aquarius, another Saturn-ruled sign. But the aim and the method, Saturn, rational, inquisitive, practical, unyielding in some ways, unsparing, rigid, a strict disciplinarian, all those things. And really under Saturn's influence, it's a question of what is the most practical way from getting from A to B. Making money, having power, being successful, managing your day-to-day responsibility, being real, being practical, are all things. Saturn rules time, space, reality, and is basically Saturn's argument is you're here in this form. What good does it do anybody to ponder whether we come from somewhere or whether we reincarnate or what the ultimate truth is? The bottom line is human experience and human comfort and a sense of happiness and abundance is measurable in certain forms, so why not just play the game to win? Jupiter, Guru, has a different preoccupation and puts us more in touch with spirit in certain ways, in many ways, really, and actually in all ways. It enlarges our mind and it tries to make us question and understand where luck comes from and where manifestation comes from, and things like the law of attraction or God or prayer or how we can influence events in more metaphysical ways. It falls more in Jupiter concerns. If Saturn is all about exertion, Jupiter to some extent is about laying back a little bit, and connectivity and abundance of a different kind. But if conventionally Jupiter and Saturn are seen as opposites, I really see Saturn and Neptune as opposites. By the time we get to Neptune, Neptune really is about the other world. It is really about the space. You know how you get lost in music or art? And this is especially true if you're an artist, if you're a painter or a sculptor. Neptune is the planet of the muses. Inspiration. Daydreaming. That realm where... Do you know how in plays, or like The Tempest, where Ariel goes and casts a spell on someone and they start acting a certain way? It's almost like they move into a Neptunian world. It's all very oceany and very blue, and you get lost in this world, and it has nothing to do with the real world or reality around you, but you draw from it, and artists can draw from it very, very powerfully. Dreams. Why is it that people need to relax in a certain sense? And where I'm going with this is that popular relaxants, alcohol, certain drugs, whatever you take to relax, where you're dealing with other substance, that kind of relaxation that involves switching off the mind to de-stress, as long as it's done in moderation. And I'm not really advocating that you do any of those things, but that state of haziness, that state when the mind and reality are turned off, are Neptunian states. That's my point for bringing them up. And where Neptune is, there's only one preoccupation with Neptune, which is to deal with what one might call real reality. And real reality, of course, dictates that no matter what our titles and no matter what we earn and no matter how we live and no matter what we possess, none of it really matters, because ultimately we're going to go, and when we go, we're going to go with nothing. So nothing is yours, nobody is yours. These are all truths. Saturn cannot abide or cannot understand why anyone would go down to this path. But with Neptune, it's about releasing everything. And it's about entering a space of inspiration and connectivity that feels real. If you believe that everything and everyone is connected and permeated by the same consciousness, that is in the realm of Jupiter, and particularly Neptune, because Neptune is trying to get you in touch with that consciousness and dissolve everything around you. It therefore becomes somewhat ascetic or ascetic, depending on how you pronounce that word. It becomes renunciatory. So wherever Neptune is, you can experience loss and renunciation. And your Saturnian side, that is all about protecting your material possessions and your reality, that involves your ego, that involves your sense of self, that involves your sense of who you are and what you have in your bank account, and what you possess and what is right and what is wrong and how you should live and how the people should treat you. It's all upended, because when Neptune goes somewhere, it says, all right, nothing is yours. Pew, I'm going to blow it all up. Not comfortable. And not particularly a happy occurrence, because when it comes to material reality, we're meant to deal with it in a certain way. Well, Venus, as it was in Pisces, met up with Neptune on January the 27th. Think back to January 27th and the week heading up to it. It is possible that even though Venus was here and making things pleasurable, between the January 10th lunar eclipse and the January 27th Venus-Neptune meetup, there could have been deception. Deception when it comes to relationships, deception when it comes to money, deception when it comes to Venusian activities in practical terms. There could also have been, if you are an artist, exceptional performances, auditions, creative work with the Venus-Neptune conjunction, in touch with the muses, in touch with the other realm, in touch with wherever you can draw things from. But more practically and more importantly, one of the things that Venus has done right now that affects Mercury retrograde and that affects the other planets moving into Pisces is that all these planets, Neptune moves very slowly. Venus has already met up with Neptune and is on its way. Actually, Venus enters Aries tomorrow. Having had this event on January 27th of some form, perhaps that most people have felt, of deception or shadiness. You know, the Seven of Swords card in Tarot is very Neptunian like this. You know, just loss. It's never yours. Someone else is going to take it. Stealing, theft, losing things, robbery, deception, cloak and dagger, vague things that you can't figure out. Who did this? When did they do? You know, murkiness, January 27th, heading to January 27th. Okay, so the table has been laid. Mercury's come in, Venus came in and kind of calmed things down a little bit in this part of the chart, and everyone held their fire back, and there may have been a certain amount of deception as you headed towards a murkiness or cloudiness January the 27th. Well, Mercury, the planet of thinking and rationalization and communication, came into this part of the chart on February the 3rd, goes retrograde on February the 7th, moves back into Aquarius on February the 17th, came in on February the 3rd, back retrograde February the 17th. Is it already Mercury retrograde? Came in February 3rd, retrograde February 17th, moves into Aquarius March the 4th, goes direct on March the 10th, moves back into Pisces on March the 16th, is direct and is here till April the 11th. So Mercury in some ways is going to be in this sign of Pisces between February the 3rd and April the 11th. So when I said February, March, April are all affected, they are. The other thing that happens is, of course, on February the 19th, the Sun enters Pisces, Pisces season, and on February the 23rd, we have the new moon in Pisces. February 17th, Mercury goes retrograde. February the 19th, the Sun comes into Pisces, illuminating this part of the chart. You'll feel it a few days before. Doing your annual review of where Pisces sits. By this time, Mercury is already retrograde, and the new moon occurs on February the 23rd. And it's a new moon that is affected by a Mercury retrograde. So while most new moons bring in something new and a new 28-day cycle, it's likely that this new moon will force us to contend with past issues that have to be gone over. Mercury's presence in Pisces, however, at least right now, is helpful insofar as after whatever has occurred that is deceptive, or if there are things from 2016, 2015, last March, April you are dealing with, there now Mercury comes in here to say, okay, let's pay attention to all of this again. Let's start to investigate. Let's look at the stuff. Let's make sense of it. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Let's communicate about it. If boundaries have to be set, emails, communications, contracts, all of that stuff is going to move forward. Everything will come to some sort of a halt around February the 17th, between February the 17th and, it is fair to say, March the 16th, but particularly March the 10th. And where Aquarius sits is also in conversation. So this Aquarius new moon on January 23rd, because Mercury goes direct into Pisces, retrograde back into Aquarius briefly, and then back into Pisces. So as this happens, there's this conversation and tie-in with wherever Aquarius sits in your chart and wherever it is that Pisces sits in your chart. Mercury goes retrograde on February the 17th. Between February the 17th and March the 10th, I would say till March the 16th, make no decisions. Do not be foolish. So if you're either pushing for something or waiting for something, it's best to leave things suspended, because things can emerge and move forward in such a way, particularly between February the 17th and March 10th, that make you rethink things. And if anyone is pushing you or forcing you to make decisions, you know, I almost think that we should wait till Mercury clears Neptune to really sign things and make decisions. I would, gosh, that practically pushes us into April. That practically pushes us into April. You want to make decisions about wherever Pisces is in your chart, wait till April. Here's the good news. Mercury, when it enters Pisces, does not conjunct Neptune. So while Mercury is direct till February the 17th and then retrograde and then back into Pisces again, we really are given a period of time where we can investigate without Neptune coming in to do its smoke and mirrors routine again. The saga is not over till April the 11th. Actually, I would say April 5th, 6th. And then May the 13th to June the 28th, Mars comes into this part of the chart. So more action needs to be taken. And that is frankly when there's going to be a certain amount of action that's going to get taken. It's not fair to give Mars that much importance. I think the Mercury retrograde is probably the most important period that we're going to see in Pisces this year. But you can't ignore where Mars goes. And then as I've said to you, the other retrogrades in Cancer and Scorpio are somehow in conversation with all this as well. Let's start to summarize. 2015, 2016, forest fire in the sign of Pisces, wherever that is in your chart. Last March and April, revisiting certain themes, developments. Wherever Neptune is, there's a sense of deception, dissolution, confusion, murkiness. So part of these Mercury retrograde periods is dealing with trying to make sense of our intuition, our emotional feelings, our mind simply not being able to get clear on what is going on and make sense of what is going on. It can't anyway. Mercury's fallen and debilitated and not strong in Pisces anyway. Not powerful in Pisces at all. So there is that. But this year, January, between the full moon lunar eclipse on January the 10th in Cancer and January 27th Venus-Neptune conjunction, some sort of murkiness, some sort of deception, some sort of confusion, some sort of murkiness, I'm going to just use that word, starts now to come under intellectual and investigative scrutiny. There might be communications about it. February the 17th to March the 10th, March the 16th, there's almost everything that is being investigated kind of needs to be put on hold and re-looked at again, re-investigated. It might actually be an even more confusing period. And by the time you get March the 16th, Mercury comes in here direct and ready to go and to make its final salvos. It does meet up with Neptune, unfortunately. So this strong planet of letting go and burning things down and dissolving certain things and creating a certain amount of loss and requiring collective sharing. This very socialist planet that does not really like acquisition of certain kinds, doesn't really like separation or individuality. What I mean by that is, if we're all governed by a collective consciousness, that is where Neptune sits. If we're all one, that is where Neptune sits. Neptune is not interested in differentiation. It's not interested in Abi the person and you the person and somebody else the person, what Abi owns and what you own. As far as Neptune is concerned, everything belongs to everybody, everything belongs to nobody. And that kind of reality is fascinating to contemplate, but when you have to go to the doctor and pay your bills, it's not helpful. And when you are trying to keep a certain amount of money in your bank or you're emotionally attached to something, not helpful when it is going to be snatched away from you. So Mercury will make a conjunction with Neptune as it heads into April, but really by April 5th, April 11th, if you want to make decisions about this part of your chart, I would look towards April to have all the information, not to get clarity, to have all the information. And then it would not surprise me if between May the 13th and June the 28th, if you have to take arms against a sea of troubles, as Mars encourages you to do and wants you to do and will require you to do, and again, Mars will meet up with Neptune again. Friggin' Neptune. I really like Neptune in so many ways, but this one, well, it's meant to make us uncomfortable. It's meant to make you uncomfortable. It's meant to give you a reality check. It's meant to be a reality check against our overemphasized sense of selves and our egoic sense of collection and what is mine. It's meant to be a reality check against that. But it's not helpful or comfortable in terms of day-to-day living. Mars comes in here May the 13th to June the 28th, and some action will be taken then. I hope you found all this useful. All of this is meant to make you investigate. As I say, and I've said before, take my readings and put them on the shelf and go back to them and test them. But it will help you to know where Pisces is in your chart and what house it occupies, because you will be able to correlate what those events are that thematically have been brewing since 2015 and 2016, where a certain amount of a forest fire 2015-16 and a certain amount of loss release giving up to the greater collective consciousness is on the menu. Whether we want to imbibe from it or not. Okay, if you like this video, found it useful, feel free to share it, like it, comment on it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. If you're interested, click the bell icon to be notified when I do new videos. My email address is in the description section. If you want a reading with me, you can use that email address to inquire about rates. You can ask me to make you an easy-to-read version of your chart. You can inquire about rates for that as well. You will need to know your birth time for that, and I will leave it at that. Long video, but hopefully a useful video. Over and out.